I'm always aware that there may well be somebody listening or watching who knows a lot more about the subject than I do, and I'm only a Morse enthusiast. I'm not an expert. But the aim is to improve and to encourage others to learn and improve their Morse. George Lucas says, I like to say that films are never finished, they're only abandoned. Well, this presentation, I don't consider myself to be in the George Lucas class, but this presentation was abandoned at about 7:15 this evening. So if nothing else, it's fresh in my mind. Why would you want to learn Morse? Well, it's a life skill like learning any other foreign language. If you want the pleasure of building your own equipment, a Morse transmitter is a very easy place to start, as you'll see later on when I show you my first transmitter. What DX contacts will be easier than with SSB. Morse cuts through the noise better, and if you've got a receiver that's set up for Morse rather than SSB, it will have a much narrower bandwidth and it'll let less noise in. Internationally recognized abbreviations break language barriers, so you can sit with your Morse transmitter and you can talk to somebody in France and then somebody in Italy and somebody in Germany and somebody in Spain and somebody in South Africa and somebody in Poland, one after the other, get the basic information across without having to know any of their languages. And of course, Morse isn't restricted to radio either. You can send Morse on a trumpet or a handbell, or as has actually happened, hostages making a ransom video got a secret message out by blinking their eyes, and that was not detected by the hostage holders. Right, this is what we'll be going through tonight. Morse and me, how I learned to stop worrying and love the key. Are there dots and dashes? A few tips about learning the code. Some information about everything's gone dark. I wonder what happened. Anyway, the apparatus, Morse keys, keyers and practice oscillators and other training aids. Organizations and resources that are useful to Morse users and beginners. And while I'm presenting this, please look out for some keys which are in the wrong place, keys where they shouldn't be. My name's John, my call sign's G4EDX, and my email address is easydogxray@gmail.com. I wonder where that came from. Right, when I was about 10, I was given two books which were very influential. Schoolboy's Science Pocketbook, which contained a list of the chemical elements, which I memorized, not in periodic table form, unfortunately. And it had the Greek alphabet in it, which I memorized. And it also had the Morse code in it, which I memorized, because in those days I could memorize things. Those days are long gone. The other book was a copy of The Boy Electrician, and it looked dated even then. It was revised from various previous editions that had gone back through the decades. And that explained how to make things like switches and electromagnets, and even an audio amplifier based on an ECL80 valve. And it also contained information on making telegraphy equipment, a telegraph sounder and a Morse key to be battery operated. Now, at the time, Western films and series were very popular on the TV, and quite often in a Western, there was a little chap in a shed with a green eye shade on and a telegraph apparatus, and he could get a message to the next town about the baddies coming on horseback long before they arrived. So he wasn't a hero, but in a way he was a person of significant power, and very often he ended up being tied to his chair to stop him getting a message out. So while I wanted to make some telegraph apparatus, I didn't actually want to make my own Morse key. I wanted to have a real one. And my dad bought me my first Morse key from a shop in Derby called Robert F. Potts on Babington Lane. It's still there. It was a military key, a key wireless telegraphy 8 amp, and it cost £0.50, which is 12.5 pence in today's imitation money, £0.50 in real money. And that is just such a key. It's not actually my key, but it is a picture that I found on the web today. Very basic, Bakelite, and I think it's steel. I don't think it's brass. I haven't got a magnet to hand. And mine came on a plate with webbing straps on to strap it around your thigh, so you could operate without having a desk in front of you. Unfortunately, I took that off and eventually threw it away, so I don't have that anymore. Right, two more influential people in my life. Mrs. Birch, who was a teacher who at the primary school, and she introduced me to a chap called Brian, who lived nearby. He was a couple of years older than me, and his dad ran a TV repair shop in Beeston, and he was into electronics. And I learned quite a lot of basic electronics from Brian. And we found that we had line of sight between our bedroom windows. So we both built signalling lamps and talked to each other with very slow, hesitant Morse. My signalling lamp was an old car side light bulb in a flash gun reflector, powered by a model railway transformer and keyed with my new Morse key. Brian's, I think, was part of a searchlight, and it was probably capable not only of lighting up a plane, but setting fire to it as it went past. It was incredibly bright. It was a real QRO signalling lamp. We moved to another school. Brian moved first. We moved to the secondary school, and when I moved up there, he introduced me to a teacher called Mr. Sills, who was a maths teacher. He never actually taught me, but he was a radio amateur. And I spoke to Mr. Sills and told him about my interest, and he invited me into his shack to have a look at the station, and I was very impressed. At 18, I started my first job, and with a bit of money coming in, I could afford my first commercial radio receiver, which was a Hallicrafter's S20. And that was it, a Sky Champion. I think that was somebody just asking to join. Let me just have a look. Barry Chatwin. Good evening, Barry. Welcome to the group. You haven't missed anything of significance yet, so don't worry. I'm going to see if I can get this. Is it that? No, it's not that. Is it that? No, it's not that. So is it that? Maybe. Rob, I can see your handsome face. Can you nod if you can see that picture again? Yeah, thank you. Lovely. Right, that was my first commercial HF receiver. It covered something like 400 kilohertz to 44 megahertz in 4 bands. And 80 meters, I think, was about 3/4 of an inch on that scale, the entire 80 meter band. So it wasn't easy to tune it to a particular frequency. Yes, I bought that from a gentleman called Noel, G4EDX in Beeston. He was advertising an HRO in Shortwave magazine, and I think I phoned him and arranged to go around. By the time I went round there with my £20 to collect the HRO, he'd already sold it. So I said, "Have you got anything else to sell?" And he got this old Sky Champion, which I bought for £5, and that let me loose on the HF bands. I'd previously built a regen receiver using a couple of valves, but of course it wasn't calibrated, so I didn't know where I was listening. That should bring a smile. Only 100 slides left. I am the Ken Dodd of presenters. Right, back to Morse and me. From that first job, I was given day release to Beeston College to do a City and Guilds course in radio, TV and electronics. And there was another lad on the course who was also doing the radio amateurs exam. So I spoke to the officials, and they let me take the RAE without enrolling on another course, because I was already doing 1 full day and 2 evenings a week, and they thought that was enough. So I bought the RAE manual and read it for a fortnight, took the exam and passed it. In those days, there were two kinds of license. There was the Class B license, for which you needed the radio amateurs exam, but that restricted you to VHF and above. And while I'd got HF equipment and I know I could build an HF transmitter, VHF was another matter entirely. The equipment was expensive and beyond my capabilities to build it. The other license, the Class A, which let people loose on all the amateur bands, required a post office Morse test as well. And the reason for that was that at the time, some of those bands we only had secondary access to. The primary users were within their rights to tell us to clear off and play somewhere else if we got in their way. And they may well be doing that in Morse code. So to be let loose on the HF bands, you needed to be able to read 12 words a minute Morse. Then one day in Long Eaton, I bumped into Harry Sills again, G4EDX, and I told him that I'd passed the RAE, and he said, "What are you going to do next?" And I said, "Well, I'm not bothered about a Class B license. I want to go for the A." And he said that he was training another young lad, a couple of years younger than me, Jeremy, in reading Morse, and did I want to join them, which I did. And Jeremy later became G4EDX later in 75. I got my ticket in June 75. I think Jeremy's was August. So 1 or 2 evenings a week, Harry went on the air and sent us slow Morse and then read back what he'd sent. And on Sunday mornings, we used to go to his house and we used to listen to the shipping transmissions and a bit of Morse from Harry's key. And when he was confident that we were both ready for the test, he drove us to the nearest test station, which was actually Trusthorpe. It was the coastal station at Trusthorpe. And I think if we'd failed the test, he would probably have left us there, but we both passed. So he brought us both back. So I was now fully qualified for a Class A license. Jeremy took his RAE that May and got his license shortly after. Right, I'll tell you about my first transmitter now, which sadly I no longer have. I took it to bits many years ago. It was published in Shortwave magazine for April 75, and Harry encouraged me to build it. It was designed by a real Gordon Bennett, G4EDX, sadly no longer with us. And the editor said that this transmitter was capable of very satisfying results for those more interested in finesse than in blasting through. So I built this transmitter and had my first QSO with Harry G4EDX in the early afternoon of the 7th of June 1975, which was the day when my license dropped through my letterbox. The QSO lasted 12 minutes and the input power was 750 milliwatts. And that's the circuit diagram of the transmitter. I don't know whether you should be able to see the pointy thing, shouldn't you? Maybe. Called a COPA, crystal oscillator and power amplifier. It says here it ran on 17 volts. I don't know where I would have got 17 volts, so it may have been 18 or it may have been 12. And given that I was putting in 750 milliwatts, I think it was most likely 12 volts. And there is a suggested layout on the strip board and a suggested construction method in a little box. I don't think mine ever went in a box. It was just a piece of strip board with wires hanging off it, but it worked. On that same weekend, it was the QRP field day, and the Derby Club, of which I was a member at the time, Derby and District Amateur Radio Society, was putting on a field day station, G4EDX-P at Drum Hill. And after this QSO, Harry took Jeremy and me up to Drum Hill to see what a field day station looked like. And there were lots of people there, families there, children. They had a barbecue. But the relief operator didn't show up in the evening. And they were thinking of shutting the station down till the morning. And Jeremy said, "How about you operate through the night and I'll do the log and we can keep the station going." So that's what we did. We asked if we could do that. they were happy to do that to keep the station going. And in the early hours of the Sunday morning, I contacted VK3MR in Australia. This is with 5 watts of CW. And I was hooked on CW from then on. At the club, they had a monthly junk sale, which was always great fun, and a notice board. And on the notice board, I saw that there was a Codar AT5 transmitter for sale. Now, the Codar AT5 was the transmitter that Harry had been using for our on-air training. So I said, I'd like that, please. And I think it was Fred Ward, the president of the club and once president of the RSGB, brought it along to the field day and handed it over to me on the Sunday. And this is what a Codar AT5 looks like. British made, 10 to 12 watts in. In those days we measured power input. And it covered top band and 80 meters. Clap VFO, 6BW, 6PA. I think the modulator was probably a 6BW6 as well. And I don't think I used that home-built transmitter after that, because I got this huge, powerful Codar AT5 and a second band and the option of AM as well. So I operated quite a lot of AM from then on top band and 80. Then I think it was in the early 1980s, I found a KW Valiant at a rally for £20 with a death trap power supply that somebody had built for it. And this gave me more bands and more power, about 25 watts out. That's what the KW Valiant looked like. KW was still going at the time, and I phoned them up to say, have you got any paperwork for the Valiant by any chance? And the chap I spoke to had worked at KW Valiant since the days when these things were made. So he knew the Valiant quite well. And I said to him, I think I've got the prototype here, because the tuning scale cover looks like the lid off a sandwich box. And he said, no, they were all made like that. When I started here, they used to send me to Woolworths for another batch of sandwich boxes. What they did with the rest of the box, I don't know, but that's the story behind that. It really was a sandwich box lid. I'm going to see if I can stretch this a bit without causing havoc. And then the transmitter that was used at the field day station was another KW. It was a Vespa, and that was an SSB and CW transmitter. And one of those turned up at Pete's Radio Shop in Woolerton, so I bought it. And that's what the Vespa looked like. Still all valves, but it gave me top band up to 10 meters for the first time. About the same time, I bought this receiver, which was an improvement on the S20, the Eddystone 888A. That weighed 44 pounds. Quite a chunk die-cast chassis or die-cast cabinet. Now, I said that 80 meters was about 3/4 or 7/8 of an inch on the S20. On this was an amateur bands only receiver, and each band occupied nearly the full width of the radio. So a huge difference in tuning ability. I'm just trying to remember which comes next. It was the AR88. Now, Jeremy, at the time we were doing our training, had an AR88, so wartime receiver, and that weighed 100 pounds, and he had it in his loft. Just how he got it up there is a mystery. It's probably still there. The receiver that we used on the field day station was a Raycall RA17. Now, talk about long tuning scales. This has a 200-foot long tuning scale made out of 35mm film. It was a very advanced receiver in its day, and it belonged to Richard Buckby, G4EDX of the Derby Club, and I was told that he won it in a raffle for £half. Right, if I look back now over 40 odd years on the air, and asked myself what progress have I made with Morse. None really. If I could speak to Harry again, I think he would have hoped that I'd have reached the 40 words a minute that he could cruise at. But I'm still plodding along at 18 words a minute, as I did at the time of the Morse test. So I decided it was time I did something about that, and I designed a Morse tutor based on the Arduino microcontroller to send accurate Morse to help me at a controlled range of speeds to help me with my reading speed. Unfortunately, although I've been working on that since December 2018, I've spent far more time working on the trainer than actually using it to improve the Morse. But that's a topic for another presentation, maybe one day. Right, have you seen the keys in the wrong place yet? If you haven't, keep your eyes open, you may see them. Most people would say that dots and Morse is made of dots and dashes, but they're marks on paper. The early telegraph machines drew dots and dashes on paper, or deflected a stream of ink in a machine called the undulator. And that's a paper strip from an undulator. If you spend time looking at those wiggles, you can actually decipher the Morse, and I've found that it's in French. But the operators working an 8 or 10 hour shift 6 days a week maybe got so familiar with the sound of these machines that they learnt to read the Morse without actually looking at the paper. And the cheap telegraph sounders replaced the expensive and inky telegraph machines, so they'll be operated by that chap sitting at a desk with a green eye shade. That's a typical, called the key on board. It's a Morse key at the front and then a telegraph sounder at the back. As landline telegraph was replaced by spark transmission telegraph, the sounders tend to be replaced by buzzers, which made a similar noise to a spark transmitter heard over the air. Right, keep on looking for those Morse keys in the wrong place, won't you? Right, we'll get on to learning the code, and I'm hoping that some of you are going to do this if you're not already partway along the road. And traditionally, and it was the case when I was learning from Harry, because the Morse I'd learnt to send on a key with the signalling lamp was very slow. It started to low speed, say 5 words per minute, and build up slowly until you got to the speed you wanted. And almost everybody made good progress up to about 10 or 11 words per minute, and then suddenly they'd hit a brick wall. They wouldn't make any more progress for weeks. And the reason for that is that the brain has to work a different way at speeds above about 10 or 11 words a minute. I think that's why the Morse key test was set at Morse speed test was set at 12 to get beyond the brick wall. The brain has to relearn how to copy it. It has to take whole letters in at once rather than assemble them from the dits and dars. So in fact, all the time you spent learning Morse at lower speeds is wasted. You'll never use it on the air, and your brain's got to relearn it. Now, the current thinking tends to be choose a target speed right at the start, a target speed that's going to be useful on the air, such as 20 words per minute or faster. Learn to recognize the characters at that speed and cut out the slow speed to bypass the brick wall altogether. To work properly and to be read easily, Morse code depends on accurate timing, and I'm going to use that chart at the bottom where I've got 5 seconds broken up into 1 second and tenths of a second. I'm hoping you'll be able to hear this when I turn the volume up. There are 2 different lengths of tone used in the current Morse code. In Morse's original code, I think there were 3 lengths of tone and 4 lengths of space, which made it pretty difficult to copy. A dit is a short tone. Remember, they're not dots and dashes, they're dits and dars. A dar is the length of 3 dits. And in this diagram, we've got a dit in red with a space after it, and then a dar in red. And I'll I'll make that sound, and I'm hoping if Rob or Archie, I can see you or Barry, if one of you can confirm that you've heard this. Yes, lovely. Right, that's a dit dar. Thank you. And that shows the relative lengths of the dit and the dar. Now, to make Morse, there are 3 different lengths of space now. A space 1 dit long separates the dits and dars from within a letter. A space 3 dits long, which is the 1 letter dit, and then another 2 dit spaces separates the letters in a word. And a space 7 dits long, 1 plus 2 plus 4, separates words in a sentence. And here we've got those 3 different kinds of space in yellow between the dits and dars in red. And I'll just, no, I can't make that sound because it hasn't got a sound on it. Right, so there we've got the whole word Morse. We can see it all in one go, but on the air, on the radio, we hear it a bit at a time. So I'm going to just play that. Anybody who was around in the early days of repeaters will recognise that speed. It's the periodic ident speed that was used on repeaters, 12 words a minute, test speed. But we can see that all in one go, but we can't hear it all in one go. We get it a little bit at a time. And the brain has to assemble this to work out what the letters were. So the first element, we'll call it, is a dar. And when we've heard that, we don't know what comes next. So it could be any one of these characters and any one of several punctuation marks. So a little bit later, we've got another element. And that narrows down what it might be. And the brain is already working on this unconsciously. And it's narrowed it down to those fewer characters or one of a smaller number of punctuation marks. Now we can't hear the space, we can't hear the silence, but the space has now gone up to 3 elements long, 3 dits long, which is a letter space. So that rules out all the other things. The only thing it can be is an M. Let me get ready for the next element. And that's another dar. I won't go through all this blurb, but again, we're going to look at what the brain is doing, narrowing it down all the time. That second character, when we go to the next one and we see there's a letter space at the end of it, there's only one thing that can be. It's got to be an O. And we get ready for the next one. A single dit, that could be any of those letters or some punctuation marks. I'll step through this because it gets a bit tedious, frankly. Even I'm finding it tedious and I wrote it. What have we got now? We've got another letter, it's a U and a letter space. I've got another element after that, which is a dit. We'll have a listen to that. And that's plod on right to the end where we get the first word space, letter space, word space. That means it's the end of the word. And we can see now, and our brain has assembled the word mouse. You might have been expecting Morse, and that shows you that it doesn't do to anticipate when you're copying Morse, because you're going to be wrong now and again. The word speed in Morse is measured in words per minute, but words vary a lot in length, from the very short words, single letters, up to great long ones. So we need an average word for words per minute to be of any use. And somebody, I don't know who it was, but somebody decided that an average word sent in Morse is 5 letters long. And again, I don't know who it was who decided this, but those 5 letters with their spaces are going to be the same length as 50 dits. Coincidentally, the name Morse fulfills those criteria. So maybe it was Morse who decided that was the average length. We've been looking at 5 seconds long, and we've fitted the word Morse in. So that's 12 words per minute, because 12 words at 5 seconds long is 60 seconds or 1 minute. You can see in the diagram that all these letters have different lengths, and you can see the yellow spaces between the letters and at the end of the word. Now I'm going to use the term thinking time, and if I were writing this again, I would use 2 different terms. I'm using the term thinking time for the time it takes, or the time that's available for you to convert what you've heard into a letter in your brain. Now in the case of 12 words per minute, between the end of that letter space and the start of the next letter, so the letter space plus that those 3 elements of space, that's your thinking time. That's how long you've got before the next character starts. 200 milliseconds in this case. Remember 200 milliseconds because we'll come back to it later. Right, this is the achievement of a relative beginner, and it takes him or her 2 seconds between the end of the letter, the point where it can't be anything but an M, so the point where this person says, oh yes, that was an M, and that's taken 2 seconds. And it doesn't matter that it takes 2 seconds to recognize the letter. What's far more important is that it was correctly identified as an M. Unfortunately, in the real world, the next character will come along and it'll be during that thinking time. And characters that arrive during the thinking time, when your brain is busy trying to decipher what it's heard, they'll be missed, they'll be lost, and you won't get them back. Right, this person has now done a bit more practice, and the thinking time has come down to 1 second. It was 2 seconds before, and it's taken him 1 second to recognize that as a D. And with the more practice, that thinking time gets shorter and shorter, and that's what we're aiming for. This operator is competent at reading 12 words per minute, and all these letters, RADIO, are identified within that 200 millisecond thinking time, so nothing is lost. That thinking time isn't constant, it's shorter. That is the brain's thinking time, which I would have called recognition time if I rewrote it. The more often you hear a character, the shorter that recognition time is. I read a book, a military training book, that said that you need to hear each letter about 10,000 times before it can be recognized with little effort. So the more often you hear a letter, the more quickly you recognize it and the less chance of you missing what follows. But some characters, like European letters, E acute, O circumflex, U umlaut, you're not going to hear those so often. Here's a funny punctuation mark. It's an apostrophe. You might never recognize that because you might never hear it. So this person's still trying to think, what on earth was that? Right, let's crank the speed up to 24 words per minute now. Everything is twice as fast. The dits now are only 50 milliseconds long. That's half one of these divisions. The DARs are 150 long. And we can send Morse twice in 5 seconds at 24 words per minute. And that means that those thinking times between the letters are halved to 100 milliseconds long. Let's introduce Farnsworth spacing, which I think is a great asset. What if we send the letters at 24 words per minute, but put longer spaces in to give us more thinking time? We'd learn to recognize the letters at a useful higher speed, such as we're going to hear them on the air, and we'd have the extra thinking time to process what we heard. So here's an example of Farnsworth spacing. The letter speed is still 24 words per minute with a 50 millisecond DIT, 150 millisecond DAR. but the spaces between them, the thinking times of inserted, are 200 milliseconds, which is what we had at 12 words per minute. So we hear faster letters at a useful speed, such as we're going to use on the air. We've got the same thinking time, which makes it easy. But the word speed is now 18.75 words per minute. We've got as much thinking time, but we can get 50% more words through in the same time. Very beneficial. So we don't waste any time learning slow Morse. You'll learn to read the letters at a speed that you'll hear on the air. It gives you that extra thinking time to recognize the letters. With practice, that thinking time will go down, and eventually your word speed will reach your letter speed. The letter speed is already high. My simple thoughts on learning Morse: start at your target letter speed. If you say, I want to be able to read Morse at 20 words per minute, start at 20 words per minute. Don't creep up on it and hit the brick wall. I would learn the 6 simplest letters first: A, E, I, M, N, and T. If you've got someone to help you, send just those letters. They can be your entire alphabet, and you can go from every step, from learning the simple letters up to reading words using just those. There are more than 90 words you can make out of those 6 letters, from I to inanimate, I think is the longest one. So lots of practice at every stage of learning, up to learning full words at full speed, but you've only had the burden of learning 6 letters. When you're conversant with those, then add the next 8 letters. I've chosen these because A, E, I, M, N, and T are all the letters that you can make out of 1 or 2 elements, dits and dars. The next letters are all the letters that you can make out of 3 elements, 3 dits and dars. Then the next group, when you're fully conversant with those, you've got lots more words to play with now. Then learn F, H, J, L, P, and V. They're the letters made of 4 elements and starting with dit. And finally, learn B, C, Q, X, Y, and Z. They're the 4 element letters starting with a dar. And these have been incorporated in my Morse trainer programs. That's an easy way of getting started. And then when you know those letters, look at road signs, number plates, any text you can get your hands on, and go through it in your head, or if you're on your own, out loud. Speak it in Morse. Da 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 di da dit di dit dit. You don't have to do 20 words a minute in your voice. Do it all the time. Reinforce all the time. Learn to read good Morse before you even touch a Morse key. That's the advice that's generally given. How can you send good Morse if you don't know how it should sound? But nobody ever does this. It's like telling a child you can't touch a cricket bat until you've learned to bowl. I don't even know why I wrote it. And finally, don't forget, it's didar, not dot dash. Are you still looking for those keys in the wrong place? And have you seen any yet? No response, right. Right, we'll go through a few different kinds of Morse key. The straight key, like that one I showed you at the beginning, the key, the military key W, wireless telegraphy 8 amp. The side swiper or cootie key, which isn't that popular on this side of the pond. I don't know whether it's the name that puts people off. The semi-automatic mechanical bug key, a single paddle key and electronic key, and the twin paddle. Straight keys are the simplest. They open and close a circuit like a key opens and closes a door. And I think it was Alfred Vail who said that. And that's why it became known as a key. They're operated by pressing a knob on a pivoted rocker arm. And that closes a pair of contacts to complete the circuit. And when you release the pressure, a spring returns the arm to break the circuit. And the contact gap and spring pressure are adjustable. And everybody has their own opinions as to what those settings should be. That's an example of a straight key. rather beautiful one, highly polished, and I think that might be gold plated, or it might be very polished brass. That's also a straight key, although it's not quite as straight as the first. That's known as a camelback key. That is a Czech military key, and these flooded the markets about 10 years ago. Made in the 1960s and still in their original wax paper wrapping, and they were sold for about £20, and they are an excellent key, to the extent that I've got two of them. I bought one from the Rishworth convention, I think it was one year, and then another one came up in a silent key sale, and I bought that.
I'll just say, just a quick in and out. That Czech military key,
Yes.
I brought 20 of them back. My friend brought 30 of them back from Friedrichshafen. They were selling them at €2 a piece.
Oh, wow.
And when we got to the aeroplane to fly back, the German went crazy. And it was still wrapped, it's with his little wand, and it was still wrapped up in the military greaseproofs.
Yeah.
And God knows where they've been stored, but his machine, when his little magic wand went off the clock, and they all put it into a little room, and they took everyone apart, and we said, funk amateur, and in the end they let us go. But between us, we had 50 of them, €2 each, and we sold them, as you say, for £25, 25 quid, and that paid for our Friedrichshafen trip.
Excellent.
So you know who brought a lot of them in.
Scary at the time, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, really good keys. If you can find one for £20 or £25, that is good value for money. Straight keys and glass arms. Now, telegraphists were very skilled and very highly paid, but spending all day sitting at a desk operating a Morse key was a recipe for RSI, and the first industrial, classified as industrial RSI, was in fact what they call glass arm or glass elbow, and it could convert a high earning telegraphy operator into a very painful person on the dole, because he couldn't operate with this pain. So glass arm is nothing to do with RSI from raising a glass to the lips. A different kind of key was needed to prevent this. Traditionally, a straight Morse key is operated with the arm off the desk, although I think Americans tend to rest their arm on the desk. A key that moves side to side rather than up and down could be operated with the hand resting on the desk, and much reduce the chance of glass arm. Enter the side swiper, known in America as cootie keys, and there are 2 or 3 other names. Basically, instead of a pivoted arm, a flexible arm is moved to left and right to close a contact on either side, and each subsequent element is made on the opposite contact. So you'd swing the paddle to left and right to make each dit and dar. Can be easily fabricated at home from cheap materials or junk, a bit of brick strap, a kitchen knife, if you can get away with it. Hacksaw blade makes a good side swiper key. A broken hacksaw blade makes 2, so that's better. And that's a side swiper made out of a nail file. I don't know whether that would actually work, because that's a diamond nail file, and I've got a feeling that the diamond coating might be not particularly conductive, but it's an example of how cheap and easy it is to make a side swiper. That one I think must be a high-speed side swiper, because it's got ventilation holes for cooling. And that's a lovely gold-plated side swiper. All basically the same. That has got a pivot rather than a flexing arm, pivot in the middle, and 2 contacts at the back. Then we've got the semi-automatic mechanical keys, known as bug keys. The Vibraplex semi-automatic key was patented in 1904. These had a mechanical vibrating arm which produced a string of dits when the lever is pressed to the right with the thumb, and the dars are produced manually by the index finger pressing the arm to the left. I think the assumption was that you'd be a bit more agile with the index finger than you would with the thumb, so the thumb had the job of turning off on and off the dit stream, and the index finger made the dars. Dit speed was set by moving a weight up and down the vibrating arm until you got the speed you wanted, or in my case, you extended the arm and put a very heavy weight on the far end of it to get the speed down to something you can manage. And these can be used at higher speeds than straight and side swiper keys. There's an example of a lovely vibraplex in black crackle paint and chrome. Known as a bug key. In fact, all these semi-automatic keys are known as bug keys. And the reason is that the Vibraplex company had a lightning bug as its trademark. And this is still incorporated in the plate. It's out of sight under the arm there, but you can see the red bit there. That's the body of the lightning bug trademark. Strange to use the term bug, really, because from the 1870s, when they started using duplex, when they started using or sending two signals in opposite directions down a telegraph wire at the same time, so you got a key and a receiving sounder at both ends and two operators at both ends. Spurious signals caused by who knows what were known as bugs. And to use the name bug to promote the sale seems a bit strange, but they're always known as bug keys. This one is a competitor's key. Lionel used to make electric train sets before the war, Second World War. And in fact, they were affiliated with Triang in the UK at one time, making scientific toys. So that's a competitor, and that's the model I've got. That's not the particular key I've got, but you can see there at the back, there is a celluloid plate with the name on, name and model. And hardly any of those survive because celluloid is not a very long-lived material, not very resistant to aging. The one I've got doesn't have that plate on, but it's precious to me because I bought it from George Dobbs, G4EDX, the founder of the G4EDX, when he retired and he had to downsize from his vicarage in Rochdale. He had a number of keys for sale, and that's the one I bought. Right, single lever paddle keys used with an electronic circuit called a keyer that generates both the dits and the dars automatically. Usually nowadays that will be built into the radio, but you can get a separate keyer to generate the dits and dars. Same convention, press to the right for dits and to the left for dars. So the left and right contacts, the dit and dar contacts, are electrically separate of necessity. So there are 3 wires going from the key to the transmitter or the keyer. And there's a gorgeous looking Bengali single paddle key. That looks like it's got a very nice mechanism there, and it does look very heavy as well. About £250, I think, for that. Are you still looking for those keys in the wrong place? Got a smile from Archie, but nobody's saying, yes, I've found one yet. So keep looking. I'm getting near the end now. It must be there somewhere. And then finally, we've got twin lever paddle keys. The difference between these and the single paddle is that you can press the paddle to the right for the dits and to the left for the dars, or press both together, squeeze the two for iambic mode, which means that it sends alternate dars and dits, didar, 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 and so on, for as long as the two are squeezed. And it takes some skill to release it at the right time so that the last element is the one you want. But the keyer for that needs to be designed for iambic mode. Pretty much all of them are now. And the keyer you've got in your transmitter or transceiver will be designed for iambic mode. And that's a twin paddle key made by Kent in the UK. I don't know whether that's the colour of the light or whether it's really gold plated. Have you seen the key in the wrong place yet? And no, everybody's shaking their heads. Keep looking. Why are keys so expensive? Now, old Morse telegraphy equipment is naturally collectible, and that means it commands a high price. But makers of new keys feel justified in charging a lot too. I was at the Junction 28 rally a few years back, and there was a stall with a row of high mound, second-hand high mound keys, all at £50 each. And I was very pleased to say that at the end of the rally, they were all still there because nobody was spending that amount of money on a key, a second-hand key at that. But don't be put off. Look out for the bargains, like those Czech military keys. I think somebody in our club bought one quite recently at under £20, and they're extremely good keys. The thing to remember about all Morse keys, it's only a switch. It might be a gold-plated switch, or it might be two switches, but it's still only a switch. I'm going to look at those faces I can see and see if they're going to nod or shake their heads yet. Have you seen a key that's in the wrong place? No. Right. I must have hidden it fairly well. Right, to practice, you're going to need a Morse practice oscillator so that you can hear what you're sending, because you've ignored my advice and you've gone and bought the first key you've found. Almost all modern transceivers can be connected to a key and be used for practice without putting a signal out on the air. It makes for a very big, expensive practice oscillator. All sorts of designs of practice oscillators on the web. Just look up CPO, they're usually called Code Practice Oscillator. I'm going to have a drink of water. And a great many of them use the very popular 555 timer chip. Unfortunately, that puts out a square wave, which is very harsh and hard on the ears after a fairly short time. Almost all of them have no envelope shaping. That is, the tone starts abruptly and it stops abruptly with a click, which is also going to get on your nerves after a fairly short time. It doesn't sound anything like the Morse you hear on the air. So a good oscillator produces a smoothly keyed sine wave. And there's an example there. There's a web address. You can either make a note of it now or I'll tell you later. This is a circuit. It's a little bit more complicated than just a 555, but it produces a very nicely envelope-shaped sine wave. And there are many Morse training aids on the market. I've recently been sent for evaluation M0 BMN's Micro Tutor. I've got no affiliation with them. In fact, I can't even remember his name. But I built it, evaluated it. It's incredible value for money. It was, I think it sells for £13.50. It's got a sounder built in. It's got volume control, speed control, and space gap control between the letters. So you can do Farnsworth Morse, and it sends groups of random characters, or you can plug a key into it and use it for your own Morse practice. But it sends out square waves, and it's got no envelope shaping, so it sends out a harsh, clicky sound. A really good Morse tutor. It'll produce pseudo-random selectable characters, that is, any letters you want, any combination or groups of different letters, such as the A, E, I, M, N, and T, and the D, G, K, U, O, R, S, U, W, which I favour. And it'll send out nicely shaped sine waves at a range of speeds with Farnsworth spacing required. And after it's sent them all, and this is what the others don't do, it shows them on a display so that you can go through what you've heard and what you've written down and see how well you did. And there's only one such trainer to my knowledge that fulfills all those requirements, and that's because I designed it, because I couldn't buy the one I wanted. But I don't sell it yet. There are 6 in existence, and I'm still working on the software. That's what it looks like. It's about 4 inches wide, 2 inches high. I know it's 100 millimeters long, 50 high, because that's the size of a board it's made on. There are actually 2 stacked boards there. The lower board, which you can't see, it's got a microcontroller on it, an Arduino, and it's got a sine wave oscillator with envelope shaping. And it's also got a 10-way dip switch for setting up the word and letter speeds and which letters you're going to hear and so on. The Arduino Nano, which it uses, is far too small to hold all the variations of the program. I've got a single letters program where you press the button and it sends a letter, and you think, that was a V, and you press the button again and it shows the V on the screen, or whatever letter it actually was. And there's another one that sends whole words. There's another one that sends 5-letter groups. About 4 different versions of the software, and still evolving. I'm going to look at you again. Where's that? No, not seeing the keys in the wrong place yet. Never mind. Organisations to assist with you learning and to support your Morse progress. FIST is the obvious one, the International Morse Preservation Society. Why they didn't call themselves IMPS, I don't know, because that's an acronym of International Morse Preservation Society, but they call themselves FISTs because the characteristic sound of a person operating a manually operated key, which has some character to it, is known as their FIST. And that's a link to fists.co.uk. I've been a member for a few years now. The Straight Key Century Club, I think that was set up in Canada. It's an international organisation, and I joined it this week. I was finding out about keys, and I found this, and I thought, it doesn't cost anything to join. Once you've joined, you're a lifetime member. And I joined this week, and there's quite a lot of traffic on the groups.io support group. And there's the First Class Operators Club. Now, Harry told me about this back in the 1970s, and I think he said at the time it was limited to 100 members, and he was a member, 100 members worldwide. And to join, basically, you A, had to be recommended, and B, you had to wait for somebody to pop off to make a space for you. So don't expect to get in FOC straight away. Then there's the Second Class Operators Club. There really is. And the only qualification you need to join the Second Class Operators Club is that you need to have been asked to repeat something at some time because your sending wasn't good enough. I am a member of Second Class Operators Club. I'm member 195, and I've been in it quite a few years. And it wouldn't be right not to mention the G4EDX Club. Set up in 1973, I think it was, by that same George Dobbs who sold me the key. International club with about 10,000 members. And although it's not exclusively Morse, it is a low power radio club, so a great many of the operators and the members are Morse enthusiasts. And there are frequencies where where they see the QRP operators hang out in each band. Membership of the G4EDX Club is a ridiculous £6 a year, for which you get the quarterly magazine, which is full of technical information and members' news. Morse and Magnificat is a magazine purely for Morse enthusiasts, run from 1986 to 2004. It was a subscription magazine, but now it's stock publication. The entire archive of 89 copies and some additional books is available at that address there. If you don't write these down now and you wish you had afterwards, send me an email to easydogx3@gmail.com or to the WhatsApp group for the club, and I'll see that you get the information. That's that's a file, a page I should have taken out. There is an organisation just for Sideswiper enthusiasts, and the Sideswiper is certainly something I'm going to take up because It's very easy to make, and it looks like a lot of fun. And people who build these things use and find they're getting quite addictive. I'm guessing that nobody has seen the keys in the wrong place. But thanks for looking and staying awake. That's the end of this presentation. Oh, it isn't. Haha. Now it is. Did you see the keys in the wrong place? Right, 73 is all. Thanks for watching.